473 players are drafted in fantasy this year, but 75% of them won't help you win your league. So here are the 10 best picks for 2022. Starting with Colts wide receiver Michael Pittman, who just last year finished as a top 15 wide receiver in fantasy points, and even if you go by points per game, was still 22nd overall. Now, he did this despite playing with Carson Wentz, and last year, Wentz ended up ranking 29th in quarterback accuracy. And this led to nearly 24% of Michael Pittman's targets not being catchable. They were a waste. There was no way he can catch them. But here's some good news. Matt Ryan is now the starting quarterback for the Colts, and last year, Matty Ice ranked 8th, not 29th like Wentz, 8th in quarterback accuracy. And Michael Pittman was 3rd at beating man coverage last year, which when you put that combination together of Pittman getting open and Matt Ryan's accuracy, it's going to translate to a lot of receptions for Pittman this year. But the good news doesn't stop here, because right now the Colts, they didn't add any major competition. Sure, they added a second-round rookie, but it's a second-round rookie. Yes, they have Paris Campbell, who's a former second-rounder, but he's not a major threat to taking away the potential 120-plus target upside of Michael Pittman. These guys, next 5 guys on this list, have a combined 56 NFL catches. So draft Pittman and then grab this breakout running back. And that would be Jaguars' second-year player who missed his entire rookie year in Travis Etienne. Now, in their first preseason game, Etienne played the first 20 offensive snaps, 20 straight snaps, didn't come off the field on second or third down. He was a workhorse back, and this led to 12 opportunities, which is absolutely elite usage. And there's one more thing about this performance. Etienne actually ran a route on 83% of Trevor Lawrence's dropbacks. For reference, Alvin Kamara led all running backs last year, running a route on 67% of his quarterback's dropbacks. So this is elite usage. The translation here is you can expect a lot of targets and catches for Etienne this year. So take him in the 4th round and then prioritize this next wide receiver. And that man's name is Stefon Diggs, who leads all wide receivers with 330 targets over the last 2 years. But Diggs currently goes on average as the 13th player off the board in drafts, which would be the latest we have seen a 2-year target leader fall in over a decade of fantasy football. But that's not all, because Stefon Diggs was 2nd at beating man coverage last year, and his quarterback Josh Allen ranked 3rd in deep attempts. So can you see this little equation we have? If Diggs is getting open and Josh Allen's throwing deep a lot, yeah, it's going to lead to a lot of big plays in 2022. And similar things can be said for this 4th round wide receiver, and that's Broncos wide receiver Cortland Sutton, who last year ranked 79th in his catchable targets. About 27% of his targets were not even catchable. They were basically wasted. Now here's some good news. Russell Wilson is now the quarterback in Denver, and last year Russell Wilson was still a top 5 efficiency quarterback, even dealing with an injury and some rough parts after the injury. And expect Cortland Sutton to be the wide receiver 1 on this team. He signed a contract extension last year that makes him paid 4 times more than any of the active wide receivers now. He's the most seasoned, most experienced, and most talented of the bunch. So take Sutton and then make sure you get this next late round wide receiver. And that man's name is Zay Jones, who currently goes on average as the 270th player off the board, which means on average he's going undrafted in most fantasy leagues. And now this is a major mistake, because as you can see from my tweet here, Zay Jones, according to the Jacksonville beat writers, is operating as the X wide receiver in camp, which means he's the primary outside receiver for Trevor Lawrence. And this is important because Marvin Jones, his stats you're seeing on the screen right now, finished as a top 40 wide receiver last year in fantasy in this exact same role. Yet Zay Jones this year goes as the wide receiver 92, and he'll be playing in that role with a more experienced quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, better coaching, and he's younger and more athletic than Marvin Jones. Major mistake. So take Jones before your friends see this video and end up taking him, and then get this next wide receiver. And that man's name is Bills wide receiver Isaiah McKenzie, because as you can see from my Instagram post here, he rested with the Bills starters in the first preseason game. Meanwhile, veteran Jamison Crowder played in that game, meaning that there's probably a good chance McKenzie is the starting slot wide receiver as of right now. And here's what this means. Josh Allen targets wide receivers since 2020 at a 73% rate, the highest rate in the NFL. And Cole Beasley was his starting slot receiver the previous 3 seasons, and he averaged at least 105 targets every single year in that position. Now, Beasley did this while being 30, 31, and 32 years old, but Isaiah McKenzie is only 27 years old, and he has much greater speed and athleticism than Cole Beasley. This is a great situation for him. So prioritize McKenzie late and then grab this next quarterback. As of right now, Kyler Murray goes on average as the 59th player off the board, so he's like a 5th or 6th round pick, and he actually goes after Joe Burrow, which is mind-boggling to me. me. Kyler was the most efficient quarterback in the NFL last year and the best deep ball thrower in the entire league. But as you can probably guess, that's not all. Because Kyler also possesses the fantasy cheat codes at the quarterback position. Since entering the NFL, you can see his rushing yards right here through 3 seasons. He averages over 40 rushing yards per game. And last year, since he missed a couple of games, was actually his lowest year. So you can expect more than 423 yards in 2022. And if you add up his rushing touchdowns of 4, 11, and 5, that easy math gives us 20 rushing touchdowns over the last 3 years. That's second only behind Josh Allen. And remember that name, Josh Allen, because here's a very important takeaway. Kyler Murray has similar upside to Josh Allen, right? The mobility, the downfield throwing, the offense is fantastic, decent or solid weapons. Yet he goes 30 spots later in fantasy drafts. So take Kyler, and now let's discuss why this wide receiver is the best 5th round pick in fantasy. And that's Chargers wide receiver Mike Williams, who recently this offseason signed a massive contract, 3 years, $60 million, with 69% of that in guaranteed money. Congrats to Mike Williams. And he's now the #1 receiver for Justin Herbert. Here's another way to look at this. Last year, Mike Williams was 5th across all wide receivers at beating man coverage. And this is important because Justin Herbert was top 10 in accuracy versus man coverage. He was that good against man coverage. Plus, Williams was also top 3 in end zone targets last year. So when you put this all together, it's looking like a lot of big plays and touchdowns for Williams in 2022. And I know what you're getting ready to say in the comments section. What do you mean he's the #1 receiver? Keenan Allen's out there. Allen is a great player, but he's seen efficiency drops in 3 straight years, including a massive drop of 32% in his efficiency getting open and doing stuff after the catch last year. His 1.7 yards after the catch per target, or his 274 total yards after the catch, his yak was by far the worst of his career. This is a wide receiver being propelled up by volume, which is fine when you're in a solid offense with a good quarterback, but Mike Williams has that same volume and efficiency and a red zone role. And because of that, I actually have Mike Williams grading out right now as a 2nd round pick, a top 24 pick. On Underdog, he goes as a top 30 pick, but in your fantasy leagues at home, based on Fantasy Pros, he's going in the late 4th, early 5th round. We're ahead of him by a decent amount. Now, if you want to see the rest of my top 200, my tiers, my wants and avoids list, and a whole lot more, including a $20 Amazon gift card, then click the link in the description and follow the 2 simple steps to acquire your Supreme cheat sheet. And if for some reason you don't like it, I'll refund your minimum deposit of $10 and you can keep the $20 gift card on the house. My goal is to make this as risk-free as possible for you, so if you want to join the other thousands of people using the cheat sheet right now, click the link in the description to learn more. So we know we want Mike Williams now, but this next guy is the #1 tight end value in all of fantasy. And that's Arizona Cardinals' new tight end as of last year, Zach Ertz. And now check this out. A lot of people were writing off Zach Ertz last year, but he was 4th in the NFL at earning targets, which was actually a better rate than Travis Kelce at 27% of his routes earning a target. And once he came to Arizona, it was on like a Thursday night game, I think a short week against Green Bay. He actually averaged 7.8 targets and nearly 12 fantasy points per game over that time. And now Christian Kirk is gone and DeAndre Hopkins is going to be suspended 6 games. And now check this out. Ertz actually averaged 9 targets per game when Hopkins was out last year, which would have ranked #1 amongst all tight ends in 2021. So secure Ertz in like the 9th round of your fantasy drafts and then grab this 2nd round RB. And that man's name is Packers running back Aaron Jones, who in his career has played 8 games without Devontae Adams, and he averages 54% more fantasy points when Adams is out. It goes from 14.8 to 22.8 or 22.9. And that 22.9 fantasy points per game, only Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, who, yeah, they're quarterbacks, so they should score a lot, had more fantasy points than that last year. But what about A.J. Dillon, Sal? A.J. Dillon is a fantastic player, and I think he's going to have a big year this year, see more receptions, but Aaron Jones actually scores more fantasy points when Dillon is on the field, 20% more. It goes from 14.9 to 17.6. And this has to do with him seeing more targets per game when Dillon plays. He's used out of the backfield more as a receiver, maybe in the slot on a couple snaps per game. He goes from seeing 3.2 to 4.6 targets per game. And look, you could expect A.J. Dillon to be on the field a lot this year at the exact same time as Aaron Jones. But if he's seeing more carries and that means that Aaron Jones might push towards 80, 90, or 100 receptions, I'll sign up for that every single day. We want targets and receptions at the running back position. So draft Aaron Jones as he falls to you in round 2. He currently goes as the 13th running back off the board. And if you see in the cheat sheet, I have him ranked as a top 5 running back this year. So these are the 10 best picks as of right now in fantasy football. But if you want to see 7 players you should never draft, and I mean never, then check out this beautiful video right here. And the first player in that video is the #1 must avoid.